This program is funded in part by the Information Technology Association of America. Business development, networking, and public policy leadership for today's IT industry. And in part by CGI, Experience the Commitment, and cooperation with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. For more than 20 years, globalization has been the word used most often for world trade. Nobel Prize-winning economist and former chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, Joseph Stiglitz, defines globalization simply as the removal of barriers to free trade and closer integration of national economies. Even a cursory glance at history shows that global trade is not a recent phenomenon. Ancient documents show that trade in luxury goods and other items has existed since the beginning of recorded history. For centuries, trading was time-consuming, complicated, and subject to the vagaries of weather, geography, and even pirate attacks. In the 13th century, for example, it took merchant explorer Marco Polo more than 3 years to travel from Italy to China over land, sea, desert, and mountains. Despite the dangers and fears of losing lives and cargo, traders and explorers pressed on in search of new treasures and the New World. Those who succeeded became famous, and they became shrewd traders. They discovered that cultural awareness was crucial to becoming a master of trading in the global marketplace. It wasn't until 1498 that Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama became the first European to reach India by sail. When he returned home with valuable spices, a flourishing trade in spice and silk followed. That trade encouraged the growth of global contact between Europeans and the rest of the world. As that contact grew over centuries, the globe began to shrink. Transportation steadily improved, and global business became even more widespread and more sophisticated.
The normal way we've done business in the old days is we would send somebody on a boat or an airplane, and that person would go to that country or that area of the world and stay and live there. The British were famous for doing this in their diplomacy. They sent people for a long time, and business was conducted that way.
At the University of Maryland's first Digital Economic Forum, keynote speaker Dr. Breck put it this way: "The first thing in doing business globally is knowing the language. But if you don't know the culture, you aren't going to succeed. You need to practice in the culture with the language. That's localization."
It takes years and years to pick up the nuances of language and cultural behaviors. And it takes many relationships, personal relationships. You have to practice culture. Culture is not something you learn intellectually out of a book.
True localization, understanding the language and the culture, remains a challenge for businesses. This is especially true in the Internet age, when world trade no longer is primarily the domain of multinational corporations. The Internet has helped modern traders eliminate costly geographic boundaries, but it has also introduced a new series of challenges. Most businesses trading over the Internet today have few or no localization skills or the need for them. Today, anyone who wants to buy or sell goods and services on a worldwide basis can trade on eBay or buy from Amazon.com. They can easily use FedEx, Ernst & Young, or smaller companies like the consulting firm Minitab. eBay, for example, has 22 localized sites around the world, most of them in Europe and the Asian Pacific. It's clear the Internet and new technologies are helping transform the global economy. It's also clear the ease of trade enabled by the Internet can be a double-edged sword. Nearly anyone can sell goods internationally via the Internet and websites. But in addition to challenges of language and culture, the Internet raises barriers of images, numbers, symbols, and colors. Using the wrong color on a website can have disastrous consequences. In Japan, white is commonly associated with mourning. In China, red is auspicious. In Africa, certain colors represent different tribes. One of the first attempts to find the most suitable name for Coca-Cola in Chinese resulted in the following: Kiko Kila. Unfortunately, the Chinese translation was bite the wax tadpole or female horse stuffed with wax.
On the cultural side, This is really a very difficult issue for a lot of people to get their heads around, because everybody comes at a product, at a service, at a website with their own worldview. If you address their linguistic concerns, you're talking to them in the right language, that's a first step. If you make sure that they can buy in their local currency, that's great as well. But it's very easy to trip over some of the things around the periphery. You mentioned numbers and colors. Another issue that we frequently see is photographs. The Mideast is a great example of this. In some countries in the Mideast, the kinds of stock photography that you see at a lot of websites with women talking to men in a conference room is something that in those cultures is not going to be well received.
Don De Palma heads a consulting research and marketing firm specializing in international language technologies and services.
If you drill deeper into a website, you're going to start finding a lot of things that don't resonate well in some other cultures, and this is a challenge that every company, both on the consumer side here, the company that's buying services, as well as the language service companies themselves, have to deal with, is make sure that the end product is appropriate for that user. And this is the case whether we're talking about a website or a DVD player or TV set or a manual for a piece of software. The product has to be culturally sound for each market it's going into as well.
To bridge this chasm, new industries have been created. Even the largest companies outsource the adaptation of their websites and software to firms which specialize in the process called localization. Things that typically are localized include the product itself, product manuals and documentation, marketing collateral and communication, and marketing websites. The process is a critical piece in helping companies become successful in global markets.
So what we do is take apart that puzzle. We take apart those pieces so we can get at the language that you see on the screen when you're sitting and using Microsoft Word, for example. Once we get at that language, then we have to translate that, and that's done by professional translators. So there's a language component to what we do, and there's a technology component. So there's two pieces to taking apart this puzzle. Once you've got the language piece organized, you also have to tackle the technology piece, and that involves redesigning the software so it can accommodate foreign languages. So it can accommodate different date formats, different currencies, different spelling, different characters, the Asian languages, for example, and their characters. Then you put those pieces back together. You test it to make sure the software will still function, and also to make sure that all of your translation in context is correct. Then you've got a final product, and you can sell that product in that foreign language market.
Nilesh Raul solves the puzzle.
As a software engineer, we analyze the client files and prepare them for translations. Once we send the files for translation, when they come back, we make them look visually and functionally as the source files we have received from the client. So we don't want to lose any visual or functionality when we deliver the files back to the client. It's a wonderful feeling to see that we are fulfilling all the client requirements and clients are happy all over the globe.
There hasn't been anything that a client's thrown at us that we haven't been able to come up with an innovative solution that actually saves them money and time.
Smith Yule's interest in global marketing and localization started innocently enough from casual conversation with friends.
I was stationed in Germany, and I was speaking with some German friends, and they were always lamenting the fact that everything they could find in software was always in English. They couldn't understand why Americans think the whole world speaks English. So I thought, well, maybe there's something there. And I came back to the States and started to play around with an idea. Initially, it was to help businesses go international. It was sort of a broad idea that I narrowed down ultimately to software and websites and helping clients translate their website and their software applications into foreign languages so they could sell those overseas. And that process is called localization. We make it local so then they can sell it in those local markets and be much more successful with their sales because their product is in the foreign language of that country.
You'll recognize the value of having personal relationships with people in other countries, coupled with his desire to grow his company. It led to a merger with Connect Global Services based in Dublin, Ireland. Eugene McGinty, who was CEO of Global Connect, is now General Manager of We Localize in Ireland.
What works in the English-speaking world in the U.S. doesn't necessarily work in different parts of Europe.
Localization and We Localize have come a long way from Smith Yule's Frederick basement in 1997. In a sense, the growth of We Localize mirrors the growth of world commerce and illustrates the opportunity for small companies to become middle-tier and top-tier companies in the global marketplace. For example, to better serve its clients around the world, We Localize opened offices in Portland, Oregon, Dublin, Ireland, Wakayama, Japan, Saarbrücken, Germany, and Beijing, China, in addition to its Maryland headquarters. In 2006, the company expanded by merging with Transco and M² Enterprises. Transco brought to We Localize 60 linguists in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, 40 engineers, and 15 desktop publishing specialists employed in China. M² Enterprises was a leading provider of multimedia and publishing translation services. M²'s president and chief executive, Andre Pillay, a veteran of the localization industry, is now vice president of We Localize.
So when you have a company in Dublin, and you have a company in China, and you have in the West Coast and East Coast, it all comes down to how do we actually localize and globalize our communication with each other. The expectations that you might have for a meeting might be completely different than what I have for a meeting. The casualness of one office might be considered unprofessional from another office. We found, for example, bringing China on board. China is very, very well documented, has their procedures exact in terms of what needs to be done. But then you take, let's say, the American office, which is much more, how do we adapt? How do we respond to the issues? Both of those are strengths, so now how do you bring them together? But that's the excitement of kind of bringing one company together.
Smith Yule has vivid memories of his first venture in localization. It started with a customer who wanted to translate one word, Pathfinder, into 12 languages.
What they were trying to achieve at the time was a large project in a very short timeline. Software companies have to get their products to market quickly because it's a very competitive landscape for them also. And language can be a differentiator. It can be the deciding factor in whether or not a large company in Germany, for example, is going to buy that product. So we were given this project by Computer Associates with very tight deadlines into 6 languages. In 6 weeks was when we were required to deliver, and we were able to do that.
Today, Computer Associates is still a customer. Numerous other companies use We Localize for translation and localization services, including AOL, Cisco Systems, IBM, Microsoft, Symantec, Sun, Xerox, and Blackboard.
And they really gave us a lot of confidence in terms of their ability to do project management from here and then source out the work to local developers in country that could really give an authentic feel to it. For us, it was finding a partner that could really help with the true localization.
We Localize repeatedly has received regional and national recognition for its track record of success and growth. For a second straight year, We Localize was named one of the nation's fastest-growing private companies, ranking 329th on the Inc. 500 with a growth of over 409% over 3 years. It ranked 350th on Deloitte's Technology Fast 500, with revenue growth over 370% for the last 5 years. Canon gave We Localize its prestigious 5-year Excellence in Service Award. In a $9 billion industry, We Localize occupies a strong position in the middle tier. Smith Yule believes the company will become one of the top 3 companies in the industry within the next 3 years.